especially in the DC area where we are, you deal with a lot of companies who do have international, either even international travel, so US employees that travel, brokers are able to really advise, like, you Blue Cross plan you don't want to have, right, when you're traveling. So even just advising on that, like, and there's really simple solutions. You were able to just, like, you don't need to pay somebody else to do this. We can do this for you, part of just, what our service model is. And it just kind of created real stickiness, to being able to advise them, put an expat plan in a TCN, a local national one, just by really taking that course and dedicating myself to continuing to learn as things change. And I have to say, I love international because especially when ACA came along, you don't have to deal with ACA and international, so that was just a big weight, as everybody remembered. There's so many mandates and you don't have that. So it was nice to kind of take that part of my brain off and go, oh, okay, we can focus on this a little bit more. And then there's a lot of reward in it because international is one of those things that you don't manage the same way you do domestic policy, which is like every day you've got things going on. International is more when you get that call at Saturday morning, like Sudan right now, for example, with my clients, we work on the weekends. Like we'll get emails about we need to get our employees out, right? And I think maybe people just saw something about SEAL Team 6. A lot of my clients are those people that just got, pulled out, so we're dealing with making sure that there's proper duty of care and a process, getting on the phone with carriers, making sure that evacuation happens. Anyway, there's just a big reward around that, because can be life and death.
Welcome to the Rockstars Rocking podcast, powered by Voluntary Disruption, a show dedicated to people who are crushing their business and life goals. These are bite-sized conversations with leading rock stars in their respective industry who are pumped to share their story to help drive you to the next level. So, are you ready to rock? Speaking of rock stars, here's your host, Eric Silverman.
Hey, rock stars, welcome back to another episode of Rockstars Rocking, where you know it, I say it each and every week. Every single week, we have the only, the finest, the most exceptional rock stars rocking it out in the business, in their life, in their personal world. And this week is no exception. Everybody, please help me welcome my new friend, Jenni Bickerstaff, who, if you don't know already, she is on the cover of the 2023 edition for BenefitsPRO Broker Advisor of the Year, top 5 finalists. Jenni is the senior partner and senior vice president of employee benefits at AHT in the Northern Virginia, DC metro area. Jenni, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh man, I'm super pumped to have you. Yeah. And I don't know that everybody listening really appreciates or understands the magnitude of the honor that you have right now. I mean, for those listening, I got to imagine you're in the employee benefits world. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be listening to this.
Right.
And as you're in the employee benefits world, think about for a moment how many tens of thousands, even more than that, perhaps, of producers and advisors and brokers and consultants in the employee benefits insurance world who could be up for that award. And no offense, but you're not. Jenni, she's top 5. There's only 5 here that get that recognition. Jenni, tell me how you believe that came about. I want to talk about that today on what you're doing over at AHT, what you're doing with your client base that would put you on this list of prestigious individuals.
Yeah, well, thank you. I want to say I was so excited, when I found out. It's like I've been doing this now 28 years, I think, and you think you're jaded, at that point. You've had success, but getting that recognition, kind of like you said, it was just, oh my gosh, I felt like a little kid again. It's like, oh my God, this is great. Because we often don't get that recognition in this business. It's a tough business, right? You hope your clients recognize it and give you a pat on the back, but it meant a lot. So I'm very excited for myself and my team and my clients, they're all part of that. we could talk for a long time about it. I would just say that the easiest way I would sum up, why this year for me, because I'll be honest, I've applied before. We've applied before, and I was like, all right, well, so there's always some, I guess I'm just missing the mark. And this year you evolve in this business, right? And I made a point of what I do every year. Like, even if something's working, I don't replicate it. Again, I don't duplicate it. We build on it. So nothing's ever the same in 2022 that it was in 2021 with what we deliver to our clients. And I think I just started to figure it out. I'm just never complacent. And I had some big successes in 2022 related to some client that, some new clients, and just really felt like a level of confidence on where the team was. And it was just really, a good time to tell that story, and I think it resonated.
So there's for those that are, that haven't seen it already, the BenefitsPRO magazine does a featured interview, an article about each of the finalists. And Dan Cook, who's such a good dude, is a producer with BenefitsPRO. He wrote an incredible interview article with or about Jenni. So check it out. We'll have the link in the comment section. But within the article, and I'm not going to rehash every tidbit, but it talks a lot about your team, talks a lot about mentoring, and how ultimately you didn't really have one quote unquote mentor. And I love how you said you just decided to be your own mentor. So talk about how that came about in your life, and how you've, whether you know it or not, I'm sure you've become a mentor to your team over the years at AHT.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably one of the biggest areas where I'm proud, of that, of where I have grown and what I'm able to do for the people that I work with. But starting this business, you graduate college, you're like everybody else, you get in, you're trying to figure it out.
And you're a Hokie.
Yes, I'm a Hokie, a tortured
Virginia
Hokie.
Tech, for those that don't know college mascots.
Yes. Yes. We're just a very tortured group, but we're very proud and we're very hopeful. Is the best way to describe us.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
So you graduate, you're just trying to figure it out. You get, some things work out, some things don't. But I was always looking, trying to learn. It's like, who's going to help me, through this process? Because I'm nobody. I'm back in the day, what I was doing was I was getting phone numbers off trucks, and calling them and asking them who handles their benefits. Right?
I remember those days, sure.
Yeah, right. Everyone was doing the same thing, and so I was always looking to learn what people were doing well or people weren't doing well, and going from that. But there was never anybody. If there was, someone's like, oh, these people are. This person's doing a really great job and they're successful, they'd move on, they'd either go to another company, get promoted, or they just weren't my purview anymore. And so I just kept going. And then at some point I realized this isn't going to happen. I keep looking, trying. And I was like, then I'm just going to figure this out. And I'm going to surround myself with people that want to do that too, that want to do more than what they're doing right now. They want to grow. They maybe want a different position. They either want to get, a more appreciation for what they do. They want more autonomy. There's something that they want that they're not getting, but they have a lot of potential, so I just really, as I went through my career, tried to really hire people and work with people who are like that and just mentored them, because the idea of like my success is just, I'm responsible for it, but it's I'm probably a smaller degree responsible for it than the people you don't see today. It's not a cliche. It is actually very true. Benefits is complicated. It's not before ACA, maybe, right? It was just about rates, but now there's pages of things you have to do as a consultant, right? And you can't be complacent. So really me just every day, we just have a collaborative approach. And I find out what each person is looking to accomplish in their career and focus on that. And so you really bring out the best in people by that. So you almost don't even have to ask. They already just do. And so and it's very rewarding, to do that because I didn't have it. And if I can help other people, especially women in this business, because this is a very male dominated business, especially on the sales side.
Pale, stale, and male.
It is. And the health insurance in general. I mean, if you talk about carriers, pretty male dominated as well, at least in leadership. I worked at, a couple carriers too, leadership role. And, it's just, you don't want anybody to feel that they don't have the same opportunity. So if anything, it just reminding, women, just how you can accomplish that.
So you mentioned a moment ago about how it used to just really be about the rates and, take it or leave it, spreadsheet it for the most part. You didn't say that, but that's just
absolutely.
That's how it was. I mean, and you talked about how there's just so much more that goes into it as a benefit advisor, broker, consultant, whatever fancy title someone wants to use. And it reminds me of, I had a friend of mine who I know also, Kevin Curran. I had him on the show a year ago. He's also a firm local in the DC area, and he's part of the partners as well. And what he talks about is kind of what you just described, which I want your opinion on. He talks about what he calls responsibility creep, meaning, years ago when you started in the business, when I started like 4 years ago, when Kevin started multiple decades ago, we came in knowing we do this, we do it well, and we earn business, we keep business, and that's it. And it's just not quite as simple as that anymore. Now whether you want to be or not, have to be an expert in multiple different areas of the benefit world, from technology to multiple different things. Talk about how you have evolved into taking over more and more responsibilities, and how your team has played a big role in that.
Yeah, it's definitely a team, and this whole village comment definitely goes, plays a part. But I like to say, I play a lawyer, a doctor, an underwriter, actuary, and compliance expert. I mean, you really do. I mean, if you've been doing it this long, you can do all of those. You have to be able to do all of those things, at least enough to quarterback it and identify what needs to be done and delegate that out. I mean, you can't rely, in my opinion, on a compliance team, somewhere that's, that's just, you just punt it off and they do. You've got to understand that. And you've got to understand underwriting. You've got to understand, honestly, being a doctor, CPT codes. I mean, you need to understand those things, and diagnoses and prescriptions, and you look at treatment plans, right? It's just, the other day we were looking at a client got a renewal higher than we wanted. And there was this one claimant with this prescription. And I was like, I talked to the team, I was like, let's look that up. Let's find out what's the treatment plan for that. And we looked it up. They've got 1 more month left, right? So you go, the carrier's not offering that, so you go back to the carrier and play doctor and say, guess what? This drug is done in a month, so we got the renewal almost cut in half, So it's things like that you've got to just take ownership on, even though you don't wear the white coat or you didn't go to law school. You've got to become an expert in that, because it is that complex. Every client, especially if you work with larger clients, potentially going to need that guidance. And you've got to know enough to speak to it.
So the key behind any successful person that I've interviewed over the years, we're almost at 100 episodes now. And it's mostly advisors, brokers, consultants like yourself, doing really well across the country. And the common denominator we hear is all about the team. So I really do love when folks remind us of that, because I think it's easy. This is going to sound crass, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but I think it's easy to forget sometimes how valuable your team is. I talk about it all the time, that your employee team members, your colleagues, they're your most valuable assets. It's not your actual paid clients that keep you in business. The reality is your employee team members that keep you in business, because without them, you wouldn't be able to retain your most loyal, excited clients.
or have time to do anything else,
Right.
absolutely. I mean, I often say they make you look smart. If you can get to a place
For
where
sure.
they're making you look smart, which they do every day. And this is a multiple of people that I'm thinking of when I say this. It isn't just one,
Right.
but they do, and that makes it worthwhile. I mean, it's like, this is a tough job. Everybody listening is like, this is hard. It's not a commodity, anymore. I mean, like you said, rates are probably the least stressful thing about my job. I'm confident we can get there. It's all those problems that I used to say, like what I said in the article is like kind of my mission. And I think you go through that as like, what is your brand? What's your mission? That evolves too, by the way. I tell anybody new, don't stress about that. Like figure something out, what you want to focus on, but let that move on. Like as you move on, like please let that evolve. Can't imagine what mine was 20 years ago. But it's like I solve problems people don't realize they have. And that's just really the way I keep that in my mind. It's like, well, the CFO doesn't know this, or the director, the HR director doesn't. It's not for me to say whether they should or they shouldn't, but they don't know. So it's our job to really avoid that risk and have them learn how to really just set that up so they don't have any sleepless nights about getting that letter, that they're out of compliance in something, or whatever it's going to be. We really solve those problems they don't realize they have, and we don't create more anxiety, around it. We just solve it.
Yeah. So, talk to me about your specialization personally in international benefits.
Oh God, thank you.
I don't see that very often. I know
No.
a few, there are others, but there's very
Yeah.
few brokers around the country that specialize in the international side for managing risk and benefits. One, how did that even come about?
Yeah.
And two, talk to us about how you've grown that side of your practice.
Yeah, and I would say to anybody, this is definitely, I mean, exactly what you said, Eric's true. And that's a big reason why I've been able to differentiate myself, is because others don't do it. And I don't know why, because really do it. It takes a little bit of time to learn, but depending on what your market is, there's such a need for it. But how it started was, I've been with, on the broker side now about a little over 15 years. I want to say pretty much right away, like a year in, I was struggling a little bit about differentiation. Like, how am I any different, than somebody else? Why would somebody, they used to say, why would somebody buy from? I couldn't answer that question. So I went and did my company, H&T, paid for me to go get my global medical certification. It was in Chicago. It was a week course. And it was very intense, but you just learn things like about different countries, and you learned all those terms about expats, local nationals, KLS, all these acronyms I can throw at you to make you look really smart. But I enjoyed it, and coming back, when I came back to do work with my clients, you start talking, you realize, especially in the DC area where we are, you deal with a lot of companies who do have international, even international travel, so US employees that travel. Brokers are able to really advise, like, you Blue Cross plan you don't want to have, right, when you're traveling. So even just advising on that, like, there's really simple solutions. You were able to just like, you don't need to pay somebody else to do this. We can do this for you. Part of just, what our service model is. And it just kind of created real stickiness, to being able to advise them, put an expat plan in a TCN, a local national one, just by really taking that course and dedicating myself to continuing to learn, as things change. And I have to say, I love international, because especially when ACA came along, you don't have to deal with ACA and international, so that was just a big weight, as everybody remembered. There's so many mandates, and you don't have that. So it was nice to kind of take that part of my brain off and go, oh, okay, we can focus on this a little bit more. And then there's a lot of reward in it, because international is one of those things that you don't manage the same way you do domestic policy, which is like every day you've got things going on. International is more, when you get that call at Saturday morning, like Sudan right now, for example, with our clients, we work on the weekends. Like we'll get emails about, we need to get our employees out, right? And I think maybe people just saw something about SEAL Team 6. A lot of my clients are those, people that just got, pulled out, so we're dealing with making sure that there's proper duty of care and a process, getting on the phone with carriers, making sure that evacuation happens. Anyway, there's just a big reward around that, because can be life and death, for people, for sure. So, probably more than you wanted to know around it, but
no,
the international is definitely an area to tap into where there's a lot of need, for client advisement.
So your firm is all over the country.
Mhm.
I know you're centered in Northern
DC,
Virginia,
yeah.
DC area. But you have offices all over the country. Now, is that have you guys over the years been part of acquisitions where you're acquiring other firms? Are you growing it that way, or as a firm?
No, great question.
Is it just random? You hired somebody in wherever USA and they started an office for you? Like,
no, it's a good question. So AHT, which is the DMV based firm, that I work out of, we partnered with.
For those listening, DMV is Delaware, Maryland.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. DC, Maryland, Virginia.
DC, Maryland.
Yeah.
Virginia.
So for health insurance, by the way, it all interconnects. Like all the carriers, overlap on those three areas, those states. So, in this area, but we partnered with Baldwin Risk Partners about a little bit over not quite 2.5 years ago. And what they're an entrepreneurial, insurance distribution company is a technical term. So what they do is exactly what you mentioned, Eric, is they partner with companies that are doing very well, to where the idea is you bring all these really smart company and people on, and you take the best out of all of them, combine resources, because now you're bigger, you go from a few hundred employees to now we have over, I think we have close to 6,000, when you combine all the partner firms, so really it changed a lot, to where the success that I've had now, I would not have had without that partnership with BRP, because to work with the clients that I do now, I had to rely on those resources. So the people in California, for example, we've got a great firm out there called Burnham. And then we rely on them for our compliance, mandates and, guidance around that. Actuaries, who just make everybody look smart, in working with them and just really getting like competitive intelligence.
Sure. That
you only would have had from your own experience, but then that's your fishbowl. So getting out of your fishbowl and go, tell me, how do I do X? And you've got people who've done X, and I was like, great, so you really just collaborate from that. So that's the answer to the question. Yes. So we partner with BRP, who does the acquiring or does the partnering with other firms, and that's how we've grown.
So let's back up, right? So you've been with AHT for a while. It's early 2020. It's business as usual.
Yeah.
Talk to me how AHT dealt with and even grew through the pandemic. I don't need to get into the weeds. That's a little, everybody's got a similar story. But in general, what path or strategy did you guys put into place to ensure that you could obviously be there for your clients on a virtual setting, but more so, you're a business, you're a for-profit entity, you got to grow. How did you, what was your growth strategy during those years?
Yeah, well, I think at first it was a survival strategy, like everybody, right? Just like when ACA passed, remember everyone thought, employee benefits are going to, single parent, it's all going to be gone, right? And the same with COVID. If you remember, it was like there were layoffs, worried about your clients, if they were going to be able to survive and things like that. So once you got through that and you were like, okay, we're working from home like this, really just that we had to increase communication. So the big thing is just we stayed more in touch, with our clients. And I think that's a really big positive actually of COVID. Is before it could be set meetings you had in person, but that was a lot of your communication and emails, right? Now it's this, now it's virtual. where we meet with clients once a week, like this, and just go over things, and you can see each other. And I just think because people are located all throughout the country where you can't physically meet them, but you can do this. So really just setting up a cadence of communication, I'd say, was probably the biggest thing that we did initially. And then the second one was really responding to COVID. Like, what has this changed in people? Anxiety, mental health. What are people, telehealth? Now people, remember the doctors were closed. So right away we went to the carriers. We're like, okay, how do we explain to people how to use telehealth? Right. So we'd set up webinars and we do that. And we'd have the carriers go through, okay, this is how you access your telehealth. So it's not so scary, spooky. And that people, the employees and their dependents, everybody could do that. So just really reactive pretty quickly. I would say just trying to, again, solve those problems that people were just starting to encounter and make it, not so overwhelming.
So the biggest thing that I think one of the, and I think everybody at this point has seen that there was certainly a lot of tragedy, but there were some good things that came out of the pandemic. And one of the things when it comes to the industry that we're in, that I think has been incredible is the enhanced adoption of telemedicine and virtual medicine. I can remember in 2016, 17, 18, 19, even early 2020, having prospect meetings and talking with clients about telemedicine and also about how we can use the virtual world to help us communicate and engage their employee members across the country. And we got quite a bit of pushback. It's not that we couldn't overcome, but we got pushback that just because it was so new and so different. And the pandemic just thrust us and forced us into this world where there was no choice. There was no objection. There was no, I can literally remember having a meeting with somebody in early March and they were like, I don't think that's going to work for our company. And come the end of April, they reached back out and said, remember that thing you tried to talk about? Can we try it now? So, I got to imagine you'd agree, but beyond telemedicine and beyond virtual health, what's some innovative, new or different or unique product categories or solutions that may not be considered quote unquote insurance? You've been introducing or seen grow in popularity.
And I think that I do think it, because of COVID, people companies saw opportunity and created new products that I don't know would have happened prior to COVID, maybe, but not. But I would just, everything that you're talking about, I would loop it into like a wellness category, but not like wellness like you think about it before, of like the pedometers or contests or things like that. It's like, just think, I don't want to use this word too much because it can get overused, but a holistic wellness approach, so whether it's a telemental, like doing this, because that's one issue with, and that's not innovative. We'll get to the more innovative ones, but access, having people have access to behavioral specialists, health specialists, because you can't really with the carriers, everybody's out of network. So there is probably a dozen of those products to where you can just use your app, go on, and access actual therapists, psychiatrists like this, and vetting that out. So I just have to put mental health out as being the biggest one. And there's so many different ones around that. And then I'd say the ones that I find to be a little bit more innovative are the ones that maybe only 10% of maybe our company's interested in, but the idea is you're tapping into each individual person because you've got a plan. You want to attract and retain the best, not necessarily, not everybody's going to like it, but there's a benefit out there that just testing on, genetic markers for cancer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So that's one that resonated with not all, but a lot of clients were very interested in that. People, definitely some,
let's talk about that for a second. Not about the product. Forget the product for a second. I want to talk about the sheer offering. And what I mean is, I've always been a big proponent of sharing with clients things that are in the marketplace that are hot, that are trending,
Yeah.
that we've experienced, that, you know, excuse me. I mean, we're going to be at the conference in Atlanta, and there's going to be a room full of vendors that want to sell us stuff, and that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
But they want us to understand what's out there. So for us to be able to go back to our employer group clients and say, look, I found this really unique and engaging idea. I wanted to run it by you. You don't have to buy anything. I'm not selling anything.
Yeah.
I just want you to see what's in the market, Mr. Miss Employer.
Yeah.
That in and of itself, I believe is a way to get more stick-to-itiveness with your employer group, because they don't see you as a broker that just sits there and does the usual. You're constantly bringing them new ideas. And here's the thing. Nobody's ever gotten fired as a broker for bringing a new idea to them. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And I always like to say, and you said it yourself, it's like, it's not our job to tell them this is what you should do, right? It's like, okay, we want to give you the pros and cons of these things, you know, so you can make that decision of what works best for you, but you do try to tailor it to your client, because I know some just, you wouldn't get any traction on. Related to anything. And fertility is a big one too. You know, I just wanted to throw that out there. It's a very complicated benefit that's just not something that's always best served covered by the medical plan. But I never knew you could do milk storage. You know, I mean, there's like 10 different things related to fertility and a lot around diversity, you know, equity, and, you know, and inclusion, equality and inclusion, I should say. You want to offer, that was one thing that's just kind of evolved, of making sure everybody has this benefit, not just a traditional, you know, opposite sex family, right? You know, so that's just a part that's continuing evolving as we speak, of putting those in place, you know, around infertility. And I think that's the place from the market where you're going to see a lot of shift over, you know, the next year or so.
Yeah, and you know, and I got to imagine you've seen it as well. One of the big, I call it, you know, pardon the pun, a warm and fuzzy benefit that's been asked about a lot is pet benefits. You know, employers and HR people. I mean, my goodness, during the pandemic, there were 50 million pets adopted because people were like, that's okay. But now they're realizing how expensive a pet is. It's like another human family member, with respect to needs of care and quality of care and how expensive care is.
Exactly.
So there's just so much out there that
there is. I mean, caregiver support.
Oh
during,
my goodness.
During the pandemic, there was one related to homework, you know, it helped too. So like tutors as well, daycare. So again, there was just a lot. Some of them ebbed and flowed since the pandemic, but you just did see a lot of where people are starting to think about, what do my employees need, right? I mean, that's what they started saying, is their needs changed, because they're, you know, something could be closed, and so they've got to work. So how do they work when they've got kids? How can we make our employees' lives easier? So we really had to start exploring that, of like, how can you do that?
Did you as an advisor, as a broker, as a firm, did you guys see a lot of your clients as a whole countrywide? Did you see them lay off folks, but then if they did they bring them back, or did you have, unfortunately, a lot of your clients go out of business? Or
luckily I did not. You know, it really just kind of depends, you know, on the industry, you know, that you've got. I think I had clients that did lay off, but it was mostly temporary. You know, and they bring them back. You know, you got the loans and things. Some of them got the PPP loans and things like that. So not significant. I'd say maybe the first year there was probably like a 10 to 15% reduction overall, I'd say, in staffing, and then a lot gained ground. I mean, there's always a couple that maybe didn't survive, but unfortunately, but for the most part, that wasn't something that plagued, you know, my clients. So they're smart people.
So all right, as we start to wrap up, and I appreciate you being on, I appreciate you listening. I want to kind of wrap up with this question. So you as a company, an advisor, you can put in the most innovative, crazy, cool program to help the employer mitigate costs, and increase benefits.
Yeah.
Do the best ever. But at the end of the day, if the employee member at the member level and their family, if they're not engaged, if they're not understanding where to go, steerage wise, if they're not knowing that they should go to the local surgery center, which is going to do better quality wise, score wise, and it's more affordable than going to a local big ass hospital, excuse my language, then I would say it's all for naught. So I guess the question is, what are you and AHT doing when it comes to communicating down to the employee level, the member level? What are you doing to communicate and engage that audience? Because that's the marquee audience that has to know what's going on and how to navigate healthcare.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's great. And I'm so glad we talked about this, because that is another thing that we just love to focus on. When I say we don't replicate, what we do last year, it's a lot around communication, because that's where I just feel people get bored, right? If you only see at your open enrollment, the same PowerPoint or the same people and everything's the messaging, you don't even go, right? So a few years ago, the team, we was like, how are we going to get more engagement? When do we do this? And we start year round, so I just say for anybody out there, don't just have one way to communicate, have several different mediums, because everybody's different.
Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. Videos, since we're doing that, it's really easy to do that. We do customized videos. Sometimes we've incorporated with one client where we created like, a picture, like an avatar, of the president, and he'd voice over something for the video, for example, so people, and the same with HR directors. So we got really creative with that. It's like a 2-minute video for that, virtual postcards, throughout the year. And then anything virtual, obviously. So this is a COVID thing where people wanted to get it on their email. We create things that are very just easy to look at, that you get it in mail as well. So not just virtual, but some people don't do that. Not everybody's, tech savvy, right? You work with workers of all ages. So that's what you have to start thinking of, not just how you think, but what is the demographic, right? So we mail things. So we mail these little postcards as well. And we do communication throughout the year. So whether it's a carrier webinar talking about how do you file your wellness claim, on that critical illness and that accident policy you bought. We don't want you to buy it if you're actually not going to get something out of it. So we actually walk through and do that. So that's throughout the year. HSA education. I mean, this is all people have heard. People still don't understand HSAs, so explaining that when you're not in the rush of like selecting what plan do I have to take. You do it before that pressure's on, and explaining really what the advantages, of those things are. So throughout the year, communication like this, I would say, is something that we consistently put in. And then around open enrollment, we actually have a timeline, usually about 4 months long, of when the communication starts to when it ends. And we just have a schedule of when they're going to get everything, and so, and then I was going to say one other thing I wanted to say around the open enrollment that I found that's been really helpful. And actually one of my clients suggested this. I can't even take credit for it. We do meetings like this, we'll go over everything. And then we have a Q&A session, separate. So we'll schedule a couple of Q&As where people can just log on and ask questions, and you could even do it at night where spouses can or something like that. And what we realized, and this was a COVID related initiative, because people weren't in the office. So we had to do all of our meetings over the camera. So we noticed when we first did it, you've done them, we've got the waiting, we got everybody in. We had maybe like 50 people, and maybe a few asked questions. And then we did a survey later, and there's like, or people was like, anyone have any questions? They were all like, I just wanted to join and hear what people had to say. Yeah. And I realized people were joining not to see what people had to say, but they wanted to see people, right? Because they're working at home. They don't get to the office, and they really just wanted to see everybody and just be kind of observe it and be part of it. But it started that engagement, of like, okay, maybe that first one we didn't get a lot of questions, but that second one we did, right? Sure. And then we've got people asking because they take all the information home, not sure, and then they want to ask that question. So really just created that I don't want to say, I'm going to use this term. It sounds really corny, like a big hug, you know, where people just feel like this isn't intimidating. These are important, to your point. I want everybody to understand when they need it, how you can use it, not just your medical, but everything else, your dental. You have the work site coverage and all of that. But those Q&As, I really recommend those. And you've got to staff it appropriately, and you really need to have ideally some client support there too. But we got a lot of engagement the following year after doing that. I think when we ran it, maybe we had 35% participation in open enrollment in the meetings. And I think now we average 60 to 70%, you know, now that people are expecting it, they're a little bit more entertained. So,
Sure.
yeah.
I love it. That's great.
Yeah.
And do you guys have, I can't imagine you have clients that are still doing paper like the early 2000s. So do you use some type of system of record or benefit enrollment portal that you would get or supply or tell an employer they should get?
Well, they should definitely always something. We have solution. Again, this is something as a consultant, I'm never one to say this is the one to use. Sure. It really depends on what they want, but we have solutions in-house, you know, at agency that we use that we'll build. And there's we don't fee anything for that, you know, and you can just, now there's feeds for almost any size client, you know, so it makes it super easy. So we utilize, you know, Employee Navigator pretty often, you know, for those more simplistic setups. But then we work with a technology consultant for the more complex one, where if they have ADP or something they're not happy, we vet that out, you know, so they'll go to work and just, okay, give you these are your 3 options. Which one do you like? Let's demo that. And we set it up. So there's not a one size fit all. I know everybody's looking for that, but for me, there's not. And there's so much technology, and it continues to change and get easier, you know, as you go along. But that's just an area we definitely have to consult on, you know, so along with doctor, lawyer, underwriter, actuary, you know, Ben admin, you know, expert, you know, as well. But you have to have technology. But to answer your question, there are still clients recently that have used paper.
Oh my goodness.
Even over 100 to 200 employees. So, yeah, it does happen still.
Luckily for all of us, not often.
No, and it is an easy fix, and that's why, and that's the great situation when you start working with companies like that. Yeah, you just save them so much time and probably a position, right? You know, sure. And then not to mention probably the manual errors that were going on that you get to clean up too. But don't presume everybody's set with their technology. That's one thing. If you ask that question, kind of like your teenager, if you ask how their day is, you get nothing. If you ask them how their technology is, they'll say fine, you know, but you've got to really dig in and say, well, does it do this? Does it do that? Has it been audited? You know, have you noticed people are enrolled that shouldn't be, things like that. Then they're like, I don't know.
Right, you got to dig.
Yeah, you really have to. So don't take that. I definitely don't take that easy answer on the technology. And that's just another area where you've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and learning about those different options.
Well, listen, Jenni, I appreciate you coming on. I mean, and very much appreciate anybody who's been kind enough to listen. Any parting shots, any parting words of wisdom that that you'd like to leave everybody? Remember, guys, Jenni's on the cover of BenefitsPRO magazine right now, top 5 benefit broker of the year finalists. And that's such a huge honor. So I'm excited for you. I can't wait to meet you in person in hot Atlanta in a few weeks. Anything you'd like to leave or share with everybody before we let everybody go?
Yeah, I guess a couple things. I'll keep it short, believe it or not. I'll try to. It's like I think, and I put it in there, just avoid complacency, you know, as much as you can, you know, and that's just something like, even if you've got a certain level of success or you're comfortable, I just really think that is what demotivates a lot of people within our industry. You know, just kind of set it on autopilot and go. It's so tempting to do in our business, but you're going to get left behind pretty quickly, you know, if you do that. So that would be, you know, my ending.
I like it. Well, listen, Jenni, you've said it all. I appreciate you coming on. And, I end it every single week with the same thing. I remind everybody that just like in this case, Jenni, you talked a ton about your team and how appreciative you are, and you wouldn't have this prestigious honor as a top 5 without them.
No.
Well, look, I just show up and ask questions and kind of have fun. I just like having a conversation. I would also be nothing without my team. So for everybody behind the scenes at the Rockstars Rocking podcast, I'm Eric Silverman. That's Jenni Bickerstaff. And as I always say too, I don't ever want anybody to have a good week. No. I want you to make it a good week.
Exactly.
And thanks again, Jenni, and thanks everybody.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Rockstars Rocking podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. 5 stars would totally rock. Until next time, Rockstars. Keep rocking.